Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to be here in this morning. We will have a discussion or maybe like a workshop to write an article for academic journals, in particular journals of law. So we have Professor Dr. Henk Kummeling here, lecturer from the University Utrecht. He is here as a visiting scholar. He has been here in UI for a couple of weeks, and then he also teaches for the graduate student and postgraduate student, and we will have him here to discuss with us about how to write a good article. So maybe, okay, please, we will have the time for you, Professor Henk.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before I start, a few remarks. We start off with a handicap. My Bahasa Indonesia is very rusty, so I don't and I have to speak in English. But there's a double handicap there because I'm not a native English speaker. I'm from the Netherlands, you know that. So my English is somewhat awkward. It's a combination of Dutch and English, and some call it Dunglish. So immediately when I'm starting to talk abracadabra to you, if you don't understand what I'm saying, please raise your hand, say stop, do intervene, and I will try to make myself clear. And perhaps one of my colleagues, Indonesian colleagues, can help me indeed with the translation or whatever is necessary. Secondly, a few weeks ago, I think, or a few months ago, one of my colleagues from Amsterdam was here, Wouter Werner. And he also did a presentation, as I heard, on academic journals, presentation, writing for academic journals. And I asked Abi to present me his material, PowerPoint, in order to ensure that I didn't say anything different. And what you might see is that there's a lot of similarity in what he already said. And so, and that's not that awkward, of course, because he had all the basic materials already there, and we have to say the same message, to send the same message to a large extent. And thirdly, so if you were there already during this meeting, some of what I'm going to present is not new to you, but we haven't. Well, I'm a different person, I have different examples, perhaps is that helpful. And if you have other questions, please listen to me. And thirdly, as you notice, I'm standing up. That's the way I do my teaching most of the time. If you get nervous from me standing here, then please let me know.
We will stand also.
we have a walking workshop. What I intend to do is give some general ideas on writing for academic journals, but it is also applicable for books. It's also applicable for writing in newspapers, I think. And I put there on the screen academic international journals because, according to me, and I think it's in the Netherlands and in Europe and all over the place, when it comes to the quality of your academic products, it should not differ whether or not you write for an international journal or a national journal. We are academics, we work for a university, and we should deliver high quality. What might differ is, of course, the audience, and that audience wants to read something else, or wants to read more material on from a comparative view or from a legal theory view. But when it comes to the quality of your work, it does not matter, in my view, at least in my experience, whether or not you write for an international journal or a national journal. I think the most striking difference, of course, is that you use a different language. But when it comes to quality, it's quite different. Well, I'm going to present, these are the questions for authors, the writers of the work. But these, in fact, if you mirror these questions, then these questions are also used by editors and by reviewers. These are, in fact, the same kind of questions, but just from another point of view. These are, I think, the main things. But before I start with these questions, I have some preliminary questions. And yeah, well, it might sound awkward that yeah, well, will dedicate some time to it, but for me it's a very important thing before you start doing your research. Why do you want to do research, and why you? That's also a very important question. Why should you commence with a research? And I think it's elementary for universities, you will all know that. And when I've been asked what the university is all about, then of course the most important thing, in my view, still is teaching. Because we are there, we take responsibility for the next generation. And when people wake me up at night and ask me what's the thing that you prefer most, that will be high quality teaching. And that's the most wonderful thing that you can do. But an essential difference and that differentiates universities from all kinds of other teaching is that it is based on research. We are the front runners in knowledge when it comes to all kinds of societal problems. We have to take care of these societal problems. We find societal problems. We raise questions, and we try to come up through our research with these solutions for societal problems. And there are a lot of questions out there. There are a lot of problems out there. And the most rewarding thing, especially also for the law faculty, is that you can really contribute with your research in the development of society, the development of the institutions, of the government, etc., etc. So we dare to find the real relevant questions for the further development of all kinds of things, but also come up with some important solutions. And that is, I think, one of the core elements in a university. Research, the teaching is based on research. And what we do mostly, especially when it comes in master programs and of course in PhD programs, is telling our students about our research. We are the front runners in research. We learn them by showing us how we conduct our research. I think in many cases the undergraduate students are not that involved in the research elements, but in general master students are already very aware, should be aware of what research is all about. And when you take it to a more personal level, why should you do research? Why is it relevant for you? Are you in it for the money? Are you in it for the promotion? Yeah, that can also be relevant. No mistake about that. But if that are the main reasons and the only reasons for you to do research, then you should really reconsider whether or not you would pull this through. Go on with that. Because, and many of you know that, of course, the dean is here, other people have done a lot of research as well. A lot of you will know research is a difficult thing. It takes time and effort. Well, you have to sit there, work there, stay concentrated, dedicate to one topic, and work as long as you can, as hard as you can, to make sure that it really is finished and the article or the journal or the book really stands. And it's not given to everyone to have that interest, to have that specific attention, to give a specific attention to a topic for a certain period of time. And no mistake about that, you can have a very happy life with your family and friends and your children or whatever, it's in your natural environment, without being a researcher, without doing research. So if you're not really interested in doing the thing, and you don't have, well, the stamina to sit there and work hard on it, and it's only costing you sweat and terrible nightmare, so to say, then please go for another job, go to another profession. Make sure that you get a happy life outside the university. And yeah, well, I cannot stress that often enough. I give an anecdote of my own experience. When I started my PhD project, and I started my project in Nijmegen, at the University of Nijmegen, it's the eastern part of the Netherlands. And I started almost, at the same time as another guy, Mr. Graaf, and he became quite famous in the Netherlands because he became a very important politician, and he became even a minister of the Interior. He had a brilliant career in politics. But when he was still at university, and we were working in rooms adjacent to each other, next to each other, he was writing he was trying to write a PhD project on public order, the law of public order. And but after a year, I think 2 years, he got an itch and said, I want to become a civil servant. Went to the government, and there he made that brilliant career. But we meet very often. Still, we meet very often. And each and every time that we meet, he says to me, well, Henk, if I just had to put a year more in the PhD, yeah, I would have finished it. And always, and we do this every time, I start laughing. And I say to him, yeah, Tom, his name is Tom de Graaf, you say this all the time, but I'm quite sure that you would not have finished it. Because you simply were not cut out of the material of a researcher. You did not have the stamina to do so. You were interested in politics, in all these quick things that were going around, but you still were not capable of sitting down, real concentrate, thinking about the thing that and if that's the case, yeah, that's the case. Then that's your personal character. But I said to him, you have made a brilliant career. Well, everybody knows you in the Netherlands and even abroad because you've been a Minister of the Interior and yet all kinds of other interesting things. He's also been the mayor of Nijmegen. So he has all kinds of interesting, but still there is this thing, as if it was some kind of a scar on his soul that he did not finish his academic PhD project. Well, why am I saying this? Just to make clear that you should not think easy about these things. Working on an article is already hard work, and working on a PhD is even harder because it takes you years. You have only so many years in life, so make sure that you lead a happy life. And if you're not really into it, don't start with it. If you notice after a few months that you're not cut out to be a researcher, well, do something else. There is one thing I would like to add there, especially for people who in the end want to do a PhD project, of course, or write a thick book, is that in my experience, and I have supervised a lot of PhD projects as well, there's always some time during the research project that somebody is completely at a loss. That's some period in time that, well, this is not any good, I will not be able to finish it, it is terrible material, my writing is bad, some people get even nightmares and say, well, I will stop and stop and stop. That is a phase everybody goes through. I also had the same experience. But everybody has a phase where you say, well, is it really any good? Should I really finish it? But then you make sure that you have colleagues, you have supervisors, you have all kinds of other people helping you and overcome that threshold, so to say, and to go to the next step. Don't be afraid if you are in a phase that really makes you not sleep at night, so to say. But yeah, this is what I think that's very important to stress. Yeah, well, then I go to the main questions. These are very obvious things, and I'm sure that you're really aware of this already. But before you go to a journal or publish a book, you have to set certain steps. And I'm telling you just some of my experiences with these very important questions. The main thing, and some people try to forget that's the core issue, is that you have to make certain that your research question is very sharp and very clear. And make no mistake about that. people think always when it comes to writing, just sit there and write your story. But if you don't have a very complete, a very well sharp research question, then in many cases you will not be able to finish it, or in many cases you will finish a very bad article or a very bad book. And that research question is also very helpful in well, your selection of the material. What are you really going to use in your work? What is needed for answering that research question? So, in my view, it is very helpful if you dedicate a lot of time and effort to come up with a real relevant research question. That's the point. Oh, recorded. Oh, what's going now then? I have to be careful what I'm saying. Yeah.
There's a pointer. Yeah.
No, that's the point. Yeah, and I just, we had a discussion already about that. It's okay. So the research question has to be, and you have to, I think that a lot of time goes into it. And for me, when I do my research, my work, then most of the time is going in making sure that I have a really sharp research question that makes it possible for me to think it through and to make clear that it doesn't come to finished. And then of course, what research is all about, at least in a university, that is that it has to be a new research question. The question is, does it really contribute to existing scholarship? If there's already a book there on the subject, or an article there on the subject, why should you write about it? It can be a research question that has already been posed by another person, but make sure that you have a different angle. Or you use different material, or whatever. At least you have to come up with some new approaches. And every now and then you have, for instance, famous court cases. For instance, your constitutional court comes up with a new case, and a lot of people will write about that. But well, make sure that you write something different than the other guy or the other person. It has to be something new. Your career, your academic career, at least in the international field, depends on whether or not you're really contributing to the body of knowledge. If you come up with something new, then you're a really relevant researcher, and then a professorship lies at the horizon, of course. Then something a lot of people tend to forget, especially in law, but more and more time goes into it, is the clarity on the methodology. And are you sure what kind of methodology are you going to use? And are you really, as a lawyer, fit for using that methodology? We, as lawyers all over the world, are still struggling with the fact that we, for ages, thought that we're so peculiar, we're so different from other researchers that we did not have to explain what kind of methodology we were using. It was clear to us that our own tribe of lawyers, we knew what to do, and we did not have to explain what we were doing to other people. And more, it becomes clear that we as lawyers, as researchers in law, have to be more explicit about our methodology. And it is for two reasons, I think. Most of all, because when it comes to the international approach to research in academia, you're expected to be very clear about the use of your methodology. You have to be able to explain it to others as well. Why is it science that you're doing? Why is it really research? Some people from the science department or philosophy might argue, is law really a science? Is it really a thing that should be taught at the university? And you can only make it clear when you are clear about the methodology you're using. And that's one thing. So to be able to explain to others that you're really up to the standard when it comes to working at the university. And secondly, what we see more and more, also in an international context, is that people from separate disciplines are working together. People from social science working together, people from economics working together, political science working together. And then, if you are doing so, you have to make be understandable to others as well on what your contribution can be and the type of research that you are doing. For instance, in Utrecht, I'm one of the program leaders of one of our 4 strategic research teams. In university, we said we'll have 4 important themes that really stand out and we should work on. And it is of course life sciences, also health, sustainability. We have a research team which is on the development of children, and it includes all kinds of disciplines. It goes from law to from people from medicine, from social science. You can mention it and it's there. And there is a important research team on institutions for open societies. And institutions also include law institutions. And I'm one of the leaders of that huge research program, and it contains the people from the history department, economics, social science, geology, innovation studies, whatever you name it, it's in there. And when we work together, we have to be clear to each other what our methods are, and that they are trustworthy from a science point of view. And for me, it's very rewarding to have such a cooperation. For instance, one of the projects that I'm involved in, a lot of work on that, is on public order. How you maintain public order. And we from law, in many cases, tend to think, well, it's all about law enforcement. Go in with the police or have regulations there and make sure that they keep it quiet. But when, for instance, there's a neighborhood where a lot of public order issues arise, then it very often has to do with the socio-economic position, the education of the children. Is there any employment there? What's the economic position of the people? All kinds of issues might arise, and it's very rewarding and satisfying that we work together with all these people from all the disciplines and come up with better analysis of what the problem is all about, what kind of problems are there, but also to come up with certain solutions. And therefore, methodology is very important, and I see more and more, and there's a lot of work being done quite recently, and when I go back in the Netherlands, we have a special course on the methodology of comparative constitutional law, and I'm teaching them as well. And you see that there comes more and more awareness amongst lawyers that methodology is really relevant. And the last thing I want to say about this is that perhaps you have the same experience as teachers with your students, is that some lawyers tend to think that it's quite easy to use methodologies of other sciences as well. For instance, do interviews or surveys or questionnaires or all these things. But some students say, well, I do some interviews with these important people, and I know that, and I write it down, and then I have an acceptable thesis or a master thesis as well. And that, of course, is completely incorrect. If you want to use the methods of social science, then you have to be aware of what the quality of these methods are. There are certain standards that you have to meet when you do surveys or you do interviews, or you will have all kinds of questionnaires or other social science. So if you are really interested in also empirical research, then you have to train yourself or train yourself in all these typical social science methods as well. So it's very important, I think, to be very aware of what kind of methodology you are using, and also explaining very often in your article, how did you get the results? What were you doing? Were you simply looking at jurisprudence, or did you take literature into account, or did you use other methods? So that be explicit about the methodology. And then a very important thing, of course, especially when you write articles, and that's also related to the main research question, is it really doable in a certain time frame? When I was a very young guy, still younger than I am now, I had to write my doctoral thesis, so my master's thesis, and I went to my supervisor at the time, and I had several topics I thought that I could write about. And one of the topics was whether or not the behavior of our Queen Wilhelmina during World War II, when she was in exile, was within the framework still in line with our Constitution. And he looked at me and said, "Hey, are you really sure? Do you really want to finish this work before your retirement?" I said, "Yeah, well, I want to finish it in 3 months." "Well, then you should probably think of another topic." There was a big lesson in there for me. He said, "Yeah, well, you have to think about I have a certain time frame. Some of you people, some said me already, well, if you want to stay in my job, I have to finish within 2 years. I have to finish. I come up with a research proposal, or I have to write such and so many articles in a journal." Yeah, then you should really reconsider what the possibilities are. And that indeed links to the main research question once again. Make sure that you have a research question that is really doable within a certain time frame. And it might seem very simple, but in many cases that's a very hard decision that you have to make. And therefore, once again, to go back to my first bullet point, it takes a lot of time and effort to come up with a real good research question that is doable within a certain time frame. And in many cases, yeah, well, for me at least, it very often costs 1/3 of the time that they use for the entire article. Once they have a good research question, then it writes itself, but it's very helpful. Then of course, and that's well, if you teach as well, then that's a question you ask yourself very often. But the question, of course, is what's now the intended audience and journal of the work? Where do you want to write for? What is the audience? Are you writing an article? In what journal? Do you want to write a book? For what audience do you want to write a book? And do you want to write for a newspaper? And of course, you have to be very aware of the fact that it has a specific audience that is interested in certain topics or a certain approach. Some might say that it also depends on the type of language that you're going to use. And that you have to be very aware of it. But in my view, in any event, and I told this already yesterday at another occasion when I had the opportunity to meet the researchers of the Constitutional Court, is that in any event, I think that we, as researchers, should use plain language. Language that is as clear and concrete as possible. We are completely capable to lose our audience within 3 sentences. And especially when you write for a newspaper, and you use all kinds of difficult words and all kinds of difficult sentences, then you're completely out. I referred one point to the experience that I had with my wife. My PhD project, when I finished it, I dedicated my book to my parents and my wife. And I gave it to my wife. And I said to her, well, yeah, this book is dedicated to you, and you should read it. And she took it in her hands, and she read, and she's a very intelligent woman. She read it, and she read 3 sentences, and said, "I'm not going to finish this." I'm completely at a loss already after 3 sentences. Yeah, and we are very capable of doing so. And therefore there is also a movement, an international movement amongst lawyers that are very much in favor of using plain language, and what they say is, well, we want to combat what we call legalese, the combination of of law and Chinese. That's a very difficult language. We lawyers tend to speak and write legalese. Nobody understands what we do. So that's for me, and it is difficult to write plain language because it's very well. We, with our knowledge, are capable of writing anything in the framework of our discipline. But if you want to address an audience that is not very skilled in law, or you write for a newspaper, or if you want to reach a wider audience, perhaps you are a specialist in civil law, but you use all kinds of terms that are not understandable for people from the criminal law department or from outside your civil law discipline, then you have to be very aware of the fact that that type of audience cannot simply not understand you. So make the language as plain as possible. And not somebody, somehow many people think, well, it's child language. It's not. Plain language, clear language, concrete language is not child's language, children's language. But try that, and it's very hard. I did it one myself. I was very much involved also in the Netherlands in the plain language movement. And we wrote the Dutch Constitution, rewrote it in plain language. And now they are using it, that rewritten constitution, for immigrants who want to stay in the Netherlands and they have to take special courses. Now they're using that specific constitution. It's not the official constitution. Then I go further and see that it's going back to the journals. You have certain journals that have certain methodology requirements. You have journals that are very much into theoretical research. And you, of course, have to be aware of them. You have several journals who are very much into empirical research. And make sure that your article fits within that special framework of the methodology that the journal is using. And of course, it's more in general, the reviewer, but also the author has to ask himself or herself, am I really telling something interesting to people? Is it really relevant for them to read? And it might seem very practical, but a lot of reviewers will look at this, but also a lot of readers will look at this. Do I have references in it to articles published early in the journal? To give a very simple example, if you write for the newspaper, if you want to publish an article in the newspaper Kompas, and you have only references in it to the Jakarta Journal or the Jakarta Post, then the editors at Kompas will think, why is he or she writing for Kompas? And it's also the same for all kinds of journals in the field of law. If you have only references to other journals and not to what happened already in that journal, so it's a very practical but also very relevant thing to think through. Well, is there earlier material related to that subject that you can find in that journal that you can build upon? Because that makes it in many circumstances more acceptable for the editors, for the reviewers, that this article will be published in that journal. So that's to some extent practical, but also, I think, on a more theoretical level also. And what also important for us as speech searchers is that your article immediately goes down the drain, that it will not be accepted if you build not upon this already existing scholarship. We all stand on the shoulders of others, but we have to be aware of that and give notice of that. That you already built upon earlier work that has been done by Professor this or Professor that, Dr. Sis, and so. If you don't do so, then you make clear, so to say, to the reviewers that you're not really a front runner in your research, that you're not building upon research that's already been done. So you have to refer to earlier work that's groundbreaking on the issues that to address. A very important thing momentarily is the use of all kinds of sources. And since we have the internet, which is of course a wonderful instrument, I see a lot of mistakes being made there. Because there is a lot of interesting material on the internet, but also a lot of bad material, not scientific, not up to the standard, without any quality, giving all kinds of opinions, but not really relevant for researchers. And I see researchers making use of the internet all the time in a very wrong way. I even saw at some point in time researchers using Wikipedia as a source or a source of their work. And of course, Wikipedia is the first thing I look at when I, oh wait, what's the issue? What does the term mean? But then you go further, of course. You go back to the primary sources and make sure that this is quality work. And there's a lot of grey material there, so to say. It's not good. It's not. What you often see nowadays is that people that see their articles not being accepted by official journals, they publish it on the internet. So, well, and then I have an article there on the internet. But yeah, well, that's no good, no quality. That does not mean that everything that's on the internet is not of quality. Because nowadays you have a lot of journals who are only produced digitally. Yeah? For instance, we at Utrecht, also the Utrecht Law Review, a lot of international scholars publish in that. So it's a highly ranked law review, but it's only produced digitally. So, but you can, of course, and you have all kinds of institutions like the United Nations, so the governmental source of it. If there are official websites, of course you can use the materials on there. But be very careful in using other materials as well. And there is some kind of a code in the way of how to use sources on the internet, but be very careful in using it. So are my sources trustworthy? Yeah, that's the big thing. There's also another thing that one of the things that's of course very important, the most deadly sin we can commit as researchers is plagiarism. Making use of the work of other people without referring to them. Say some 50 years ago, many people did it, because there was hardly a possibility that people would find out. And even in the earlier days of Indonesia, where the Dutch were still thinking that they could run this country, we had a lot of experience with the fact that some people worked here in Indonesia, there was material here being produced, and they translated simply into Dutch, and then they had a PhD in Leiden or in other places. So then we traveled still by ship, nobody would know, so that would be no problem. But nowadays, immediately, the original sources are going to be found. And immediately would have a problem. I'm sure, and I heard this just a few days ago, that there were also cases in Indonesia of plagiarism that were in the news. I can't simply think of a reason that people want to do that anymore. Because everybody will find out in the end. And there's no and of course, why would you do this? You are the researcher. You're the one that wants to come up with a new interesting idea. Why use the material of other people without referring to it? Now, some things may seem quite, I think, obvious. One of the also one of the things that's also very relevant, and Mr. Wiesel knows about it, because we talked about it earlier on. He's not to blame for it, but we had a discussion about it. Is all the material that you're using really relevant for the analysis? It's also an important thing. Cut that wood. That's important. Is all the things relevant? What I often use as a metaphor for my own students and my own research is that there is a famous story of a famous Russian playwright, Chekhov. And he said once, if in one of my plays I put a gun at the wall, right there is a gun at the wall, above the mantelpiece, then I have to make sure that the gun is being used, that somebody should shoot with it, that a murder will be committed with it. And so don't have descriptions that are of no relevance for solving the problem. But a lot of people, and that's very common, a lot of people read all kinds of things and they have this idea that everything they have read, they have to put it in that article as well. And in my view, it's just showing off that you really read something, and if it's not relevant for the reader, then why should you use it? So it's I think a very important, be very aware of the fact that that you really only produce the material that is relevant for finishing the argument. And yeah, we all of us have little time. All readers have little time. Why you use up their time, so to say, by letting them read all kinds of redundant information. For me, also very important is the question, before you publish something, are colleagues also involved? Have other colleagues read your article? For me, a research environment is all about having colleagues that you can turn to read your material, and she can always come up with answers that are already on the screen. Is it indeed using the relevant material? Has it the correct arguments, etc., etc.? And the line of argumentation and is it clear and convincing are, of course, very important issues. For me, also a relevant thing, but perhaps other people have the problem as well. I'm perfectly capable of reviewing and assessing the quality of work of others. I'm very capable of checking the language of opinions of others, but I'm completely at a loss when I have to read my own articles, because I only read what I think that is there. I not read what is there, but I thought of something and I read tremendously fast, so I have to convince myself, sit down and read on a slow pace that article. But I will always produce typos, and when you produce a lot of typos, and a lot of reviewers will say, well, that person is not very careful in his research. Typos are very often seen as a result of sloppy thinking and sloppy work. So make sure that there are colleagues there, language experts that really are helpful in being very aware of the fact that you have not only sloppy writers, but also a lot of sloppy readers. And at least I always said there are a lot of persons who don't have a lot of time. And what they do in many cases is when they really ask themselves, do I want to read this article? Do I want to read this book? There are only three things that they check. They're looking at the abstract. What's this article about? They read the introduction, and then in many cases they immediately go to the conclusion. And to the disappointment of many of my PhD students, I always tell them that you have to make sure that these three parts of your work are in excellent shape, because that is really crucial in making sure that the reader wants to read the rest of your work as well. situation of books that probably will still not read everything. But these things are important. Make sure that you have a good introduction and make sure that you have a good conclusion. I always use the metaphor, you have to grab the reader by his hair and make sure that he or she is willing to go through with it, to read it from the beginning to the end. So introduction and conclusion is very important. Sometimes I always say, well, perhaps you go to a party every now and then and you have that very nasty uncle who asks you the question, what are you going to do? What are you doing in real life? Is it really relevant what you're going to do? And then you have to explain that very nasty, terrible uncle, yeah, well, I do very relevant work, but he will only listen to you for 3 or 4 minutes, and then his attention will go to the food or to the drinks that are on the table. So make sure that you have some catchy phrases that really catches the attention of these persons, these readers, because you would have so little time and so many things to read, so make sure that they really, these abstracts, the introduction and conclusion, really grab the attention. The abstract grabs the attention, the introduction grabs the attention, and that the conclusions are really up to the standard. Yeah, well, articles especially, but it also relates to one of my first topics, is, yeah, well, perhaps it is very wise to stick to one argument, to only one topic and only one issue. When it comes to the introduction, the best thing, in my view, is to start with the problem. And why is that problem relevant? So not lengthy things Winston Churchill once said, and in the Pancasila, tremendous long stories before you come to the research question. And boom, the research question in front. Make sure that you grab the attention of the beginning. Yeah, that's I think. When it comes to writing in international journals, this was all general, all general related to all kinds of journals that you're going to write. When it comes to international journals, they are, of course, more attracted to worldwide issues. But also, and in my view, very helpful in comparative research. So if you really want the interest of an international journalist, international journalists are not only about international law, of course. They are interested in what's going on in civil law in Indonesia as well, or in constitutional law in Indonesia as well. But if you want, take them in, so to say, and really get them interested in your work, then your work has to refer to more general theories, of course. For instance, how the Constitutional Court is working, the political question doctrine, how the judicial review is organized. You have to refer to legal theory or legal general theories, or you can have a very comparative approach. So, well, here in Asia we have several Constitutional Court courses being set up, and let's see how they work. And the main reason I'm saying is this, because that what we see on a worldwide scale is that a lot of research is being done in improving the domestic legal systems by looking at other systems as well. And there are even constitutions, and I already mentioned that to some people. The Constitution, for instance, of South Africa explicitly makes it possible for courts there to use foreign sources as well to motivate and to their arguments, to motivate their decisions. And say, well, we have court cases in Germany or in Indonesia and dealing with the same type of problems, and they found this kind of solution, and in our view it's also applicable in our complete situation. So what we see on a worldwide scale is that comparative law is very helpful in improving the law, and so comparative law is a topic that is of interest to many journals as well, especially the international journals. There are a lot of international journals who are very interested in these comparative approaches. So if you have the intention to write for an international journal, of course all these earlier things apply as well, but you have, because it's a different audience, you have to make sure that it also of interest to the audience of that typical journal. Some people keep asking me, why should I publish in an international journal? Because, yeah, well, I'm a Dutch lawyer. I practice Dutch law, or I want to study Dutch law. Why in an international journal? Or I'm from Indonesia. Yeah, well, of course, it's also very relevant to publish in your own national journals. There's no doubt about that. Most of my work goes into national journals. Because, yeah, well, I practice and I teach a lot of constitutional law, simply concerning typical Dutch problems. But there are some other issues there as well. For instance, there can be, and that's in many cases you see that, university requirements. You say, well, we as a university want to apply to a certain international standard. They want to be relevant to that international standard. So yeah, well, you have to be there in the international field as well. People have to be aware of the fact that you are a relevant university and that you produce high quality research. So in many cases, university sets requirements, and and there you have to put on the standard if you want to be competing. The thing that I already mentioned was that a lot of comparative work is being done because well, there is where the progress is. Medicine for ages already was an international sports, so to say. Also goes for science. It's been studied on an international level. Law sees the same development. Law is an international thing. Also domestic law has a lot of international implications, no doubt about it. And so research is a global affair and competition, and therefore it's in many cases quite of the ordinary that people also publish in international journals. Why in English? Yeah, well, there's no way around about that. English is the common research language. It's the lingua franca, as we say in Latin, of international research. And the most wonderful thing, of course, that we are fully capable of understanding each other when we talk to each other in English. But whenever some guy or girl from the UK steps in, or from the USA steps in, then we get into trouble because they have a vocabulary and they have use this type of grammar that is completely, in many cases, it's from outer space. And sometimes they even have a dialect that we cannot follow. But the lucky thing is that the rest of the world, not the English-speaking people, the British and the people of the USA, they will cause some problems every now and then. But we, I think, in the rest of the world are fully capable of using the English language in a way that we can understand each other. So there's no hesitation about that. That's the way forward. You use international article, and don't be afraid to use the English. You can find all kinds of translators, other people as well, that can be helpful in smoothing up the language. When I'm talking here, for me the English is also not a problem. I write a lot of theses also in English, but before I publish it in the journal, I have to make sure that a really good expert in that language will have to look at it. Because I not only make my typos, but I also make all kinds of other mistakes in the language. A very practical thing, but can also be a very helpful thing, is that if you really are considering to publish in an international journal, think about co-authorship. Perhaps you have already contacts abroad in other countries in Asia or in other parts of the world with people who are also working on that same kind of topic, on that same kind of research, and perhaps you could say, well, can we work together? It can also be the case that you've written a piece of somebody, also in an international journal, and say, well, very interesting, you've written on this topic already, but perhaps it would also be relevant to have an Indonesian approach or an Indonesian side to the topic as well. Could we please work together in making sure that we make a new article on the topic and publish it in international journal. So in many cases you learn from the more experienced persons, of course. And if you find somebody who is willing to work with you, that could be a very helpful step in publishing in international journals. So you're not standing there alone, and people can work with you and make sure that you have a greater chance of success, especially when it's already somebody who's already been accepted in the international community as a relevant researcher. And it can also be helpful as a stepping stone for your academic career. Co-authorship is a thing that you really should consider. It's a very practical means of going further. Now, well, oh, that has already been mentioned. Yes, there we go to the. I pushed the wrong button. Sorry. The final one. Just for a part recapturing. That journal, each and every journal has its own profile. So make sure that you go to the appropriate journal in accordance with the idea of the article. So useful to add a reference. When it comes to quantity, many journals have some requirements on that. K stands for those who are not familiar with these terms, K stands for kilo, which means thousands. In many cases, a lot of international journals use these kind of requirements, 8,000 words, 10,000 words, no more. There are some journals, international, also in Germany, they're terrible, I think, in my view. In the United States, want to add more words for their articles, but for me, these articles are in many cases very boring because they go on and go and on and on and on. So there are sometimes to some extent mini books, so to say. And I think that there's also a difference in the style there. For me, the most important thing is that be brief, be as concrete as possible. It's not about producing words, it's producing ideas and solutions. And therefore, it's not about the amount of words that you use. And then, coming back to the earlier thing, there is, when I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned, no fundamental difference in types of writing when it comes to the types of journals that you're writing for. At least when it comes to the quality of the work. It cannot be the case that when you write in a newspaper, then you deliver sloppy thinking, or that the work is not up to the legal standard. It has to be to the same standard as you would write in an academic journal. The main difference is, of course, that you won't use footnotes in a Compass article or in a Jakarta Post or whatever newspaper you're writing. So no footnotes, no other big references. In many cases, well, every now and then you have a reference, and you have to address a totally different audience that will need somewhat more explanation. But yeah, well, when it comes to the quality of the work, it will be a difference. Okay, these were the things that I had to offer for the initial phase, and I'd be happy to answer all kinds of questions that you might have, suggestions, improvements. So please go ahead.
So I invite all the participants to do the question and answer session. Is there any? Please, alas.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I want to apologize
start? I think it all starts with an idea. An idea that you've heard something on the news, you've read something in an academic journal or in a newspaper, and you say, hey, this is new. This is a question that has not been raised before, or it has not been raised in that way before, or within the specific content before. So there's a new thing there. So I want to study the research, the question. Is it a real question, of course, and that's the starting point. Yeah, and then I think in many cases people work differently, but for me, and I think for many people will work that way, that we have, if you have that research question already, at least an initial research question, a draft question, then you, of course, you have to for all the relevant material related to that research question. And that, of course, will take a lot of time, because you have to really assess whether or not the material is relevant to come up with solutions for it. But if you have a real concrete and very sharp research question, it's also very helpful in making decisions whether or not a certain article or a certain book is really relevant for the topic that you want to address. Yes, research question first, but then you go into the materials, see what's already written about that, and there are people, and then people go separate ways, in my experience. Also my students, my PhD students go separate ways. Some people need to write before they come up with good ideas. So writing is a method of sharpening their minds. But they, in many cases, have to write 5 or 6 drafts of a piece of work before they come to the final draft. And for me, that's a very tedious task, because, well, you know the saying, of course, it's always difficult to murder your darlings. If you have written already something, then it's very difficult to throw that piece of work away. But other people, like me, only start to write at the moment that they are almost clear about not only the research question, but also what the conclusion will be, and what the middle part of the article will be. What are the sub-questions that you have to pose? What are the paragraphs in the article? And then, of course, and you have what we call a really red line from the research question to the conclusion, that you will be aware of what you're going to do. And then, if you already know what you're going to say, it is in many cases far more easier to write indeed. And it's far more easier to cut out the dead wood and make sure that what you write is really relevant to the answer of the research question. So, well, indeed, research question first, then you have to, well, muddle yourself through all the material that's out there, and then then you can ask yourself the question: can I already start writing? Or, in my experience, it would be best to really think this through and say, before I start to write, I want to come up with a conclusion, and that's the way it works for me. And of course, during the writing process, every now and then I improve an idea, or it takes some kinds of other directions as well. But and it's also for me a way of making sure that it is within the set time frame, and make sure that you are not scribbling all the time in all kinds of directions, and then in the end you think, well, where was the deadline? I'm just was already weeks and months across. Does it answer your question? Other ones, yeah?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. I have several questions. The first one, maybe regarding, I don't know, the first one regarding the methodology.
Yes.
When it comes to the methodology, sometimes I'm a bit confused how to, which methodology is proper, especially when it comes to comparative constitutional law? Do you have any reference or books that very suitable in terms of methodology for comparative constitutional law? That's the first one. The second one, I just want to know about your writing process. What you usually do when you want to find ideas. Sometimes when you stuck in the middle of your writing.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And
yeah. Okay. But the first question is by far the easiest. There are indeed some books there, but also some articles. And just because I teach next week, once again on the methodology of comparative constitutional law, comparative law in general, I would be happy to send you some material to see how we do these kind of things. Yeah, the other question is by far more difficult because it all happens in the brain, and you have to train yourself in finding ways stepping over all these hurdles that are there. Coming up with new ideas, that's no problem. But each and every time when I open a newspaper each morning, I see already 5 new ideas for a new article. I simply have no time to write about it, but there's a lot of new work to produce simply by watching the news, by reading the newspapers, by looking at governmental projects, pieces of legislation, new courtrooms, etc. There are so many questions out there, so that's not a problem. The problem is every now and then, where do you find your ways around the hurdles in the project? And yet people have their own types of needs for it. What I every now and then do is start running. With my running gear, I go running, or go for a walk. Or it can also be that I say, well, just put it away, talk with my wife and children, go for the family, just relax, etc. You have all kinds of needs, practical needs to circumvent that. But in many cases, some people say, yeah, it's all about inspiration. No, it's about hard work. In the end, you have to force yourself to sit behind your desk, behind your computer, and really write the next sentence. It's all about dedication, concentration, and endurance. The article won't write itself. You have to do it yourself. So every now and then, of course, you have to relax. But what happens to me, and we hear it from many researchers as well, if you really are concentrated, in many cases you get into a flow. Some people have even feel some kind of a fever, and literally some kind of fever as well. Really have this good idea, and very concentrated working on it. And you have to find a way to get into that flow in order to finish that work. But there's no general rule for that. You have to find, you have to try. It's also about learning, to create some experience for yourself and see what works. Some people think, yeah, well, an extra pot of coffee will help. Whatever suits you. In my earlier days, I had the thought that I could not really think when I did not smoke a cigar. I was addicted to smoking cigars. So I thought at one point in time, yeah, well, I cannot think of anything if I don't have a cigar in my mouth behind my mind. So that's just fooling myself, of course. So 20 years ago, I stopped with it. And I still write things, but you have to find a way, and it's almost always through experience to get into the flow, so to speak. And that's not an easy answer. But the main thing is, it's a simple thing. It is and will be hard work, but hopefully will if you like. And that makes it easy to sit there behind your desk and work.
It's still related to the methodology.
Yeah.
How to find the right methodology methodology, or is it possible if we stop in the middle, then we can change or add more methodology in our research?
Yeah, it all depends on the research question. So sometimes it's very obvious, of course. Sometimes it's very obvious in the sense that when you want to do research on whether or not there is a specific view of the Constitutional Court for some 5 years on a specific issue, then you simply use the method of analyzing the Constitutional Court rulings, and every now and then you use literature as well. But it can also be the case that you say, well, if I really want to have concrete knowledge on what's going on in a specific area, I have to call in the help of other methodologies as well. If you, for instance, want to know if certain court proceedings in divorce cases are working out well to the satisfaction of both the lawyers and the people that are going through divorce, etc. And of course, you have to use also other kinds of methods. That you have to do interviews or questionnaires, or for instance, perhaps you go to judges. Sometimes there is also a problem with the fact that there is a relevant research question, but there is hardly any legal material there to come up with the answers. For instance, I have done a project in Suriname some years ago, Suriname in Latin America, and the problem they have there is that their jurisprudence is not published, and the courtrooms are simply there in drawers of judges, of lawyers, of other people, but there's no journal of jurisprudence, there's no digital system where you can find the material. And then there was a PhD student, at least a possible PhD student, who wanted to do research on the way the court, on the problems with divorce. The problem, if the law of Suriname, the family law of Suriname, was really helpful in solving divorce problems. But there was no, you could find no jurisprudence. Well, the only solution that you can have as a lawyer then is indeed go about and interview all the relevant actors in that situation. You have to interview the people that have been divorced, you have to interview some children, you have to interview the lawyers, you have to interview judges, and then you have a more complete picture of what's really going on, where the troubles are, where the problems lie, and then you can come up with some legal solutions for the problem. So it also depends some period of time, in some cases, on the material that's available. But I have to bring up one warning, especially when there is no relevant material in law there. You have to be very, very careful in doing that research, because if there is a time frame, then you probably will not live up to it. Will into trouble when the deadline is in sight. So one of the things was on the first slide is really doable. It also depends on the fact if there is really relevant material and available material. In the early days, sometimes you needed some material which was simply not there in your own library. And it is not there in your own library, and it's also not on the internet. You should really reconsider whether or not you should write about it. So that all these things do matter. But the main thing is that there are certain research questions that require the use of certain methodologies. That's the more general thing. And indeed, every now and then, but it all depends on the sub-questions that you have, you can switch, you have to use another methodology. So it's not about one methodology. Methodology is about making clear to the audience that you use relevant ways of finding a material, relevant ways to finding the conclusions that are capable of reproducing by other people as well. That you can really sources. Yes. Yeah.
Because my colleague, an editor of journal from Faculty of Engineering said I subject to writing together but with other disciplines. And what do you think about writing a legal research with other disciplines? Is it possible? Is it a limitation that we can still meet the thesis is a legal research?
Yeah, well, it's a very relevant question, but some of it has already been answered in my presentation. I think that what we see nowadays that the way the research goes ahead is more into a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach. That does not necessarily mean that disciplinary research is not relevant anymore. I always tell my own people the most important thing that you can do is be a high quality researcher in your own discipline. People have to take you seriously as a lawyer, as a law researcher, as a constitutional law researcher. So make sure that you're good in your own discipline of law, and also as a researcher. But the next step in many cases is that there are certain societal problems. There's a problem with air pollution, there's a problem with water delivery, there's a problem with all kinds of issues that you can imagine. And you simply cannot come up as a lawyer with a solution to the problem. Your engineering colleague can probably be helpful in assessing whether or not there's a possibility to improve the water delivery. But you have to think about, is it really possible in law? What kind of regulations are necessary to make this work? And what I often see is that a lot of colleagues, also from social science and economics, come up to us and to me as a lawyer and say, well, we can make all kinds of models, but we need the normative framework for assessing whether or not this is really feasible within a constitutional system. You can, as an economist, you can come up with all kinds of things, but if simply not possible to implement these ideas, because the law simply forbids it, or makes it not possible, then you're nowhere. The most peculiar thing that happened in the Netherlands some 10 years ago, we had another cabinet, there was a need for budget cuts. The government at that time made 20 working groups, and they had to come up with all kinds of solutions for budget cuts in that specific area. And these 20 working groups had no legal advisor in there. There was no lawyer. And the end result was that they came up with all kinds of brilliant ideas, and immediately after they were being published, they completely were in the rubbish bin once again, because the constitutional law, the Supreme Court rulings, in the European law, all these legal frameworks simply did not allow to implement these solutions. So that we also learned about to reality as well. And what I see is that nowadays there are a lot of cooperation going on between these separate disciplines. So I think indeed, it's in many cases the way ahead, and it's also very rewarding. I think that in many cases as a lawyer can contribute to better solutions, to come up with better solutions than you would if you would simply go about a certain problem only from a legal point of view. Right? And then you come to the difficult part. Still a lot of journals are only focused on one discipline. And then you have a problem with publishing your book. But gradually you will already see that the policies of journals are going to change. For instance, our Dutch law journal, National Journal, is also accepting articles written by lawyers and economists, social science people, because it's also relevant material we look for as well. So gradually, all kinds of journals are opening up. And what I also see is the rise of more thematic journals, not only about disciplines, civil law, family law, criminal law, etc., but more thematic approach. For instance, environment, these kind of things, about children or families, and that opens up to other disciplines as well.
And then Cornelis.
Yeah, Cornelis.
Thank you for the workshop. I have a question. When we want to write an article and then send it to international journal, let's say the journal is based in the US or the European countries, and then I will write an issue and also comparative approach in ASEAN countries.
Yeah.
Let's say Indonesia, Malaysia, or Singapore. Do you think the international journal based in the US or European countries are interested? Or they will be more interested when you make a comparative between Indonesia and the US or one of the European countries?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that first and foremost, of course, you have to make clear why there's any relevance to the United States or the European Union. If you come up with a clear link with, for instance, can be, for instance, I read this morning in the newspaper that the Vice President of the United States is coming to Indonesia in a few weeks. Yeah, he can deal, I think, especially talking about trade and tourism. I think, but it can be also issue as well. So in that moment, you also have a link. How can the USA open up the markets in Asia? Or in Asia we work this way, and if the US wants to be relevant for Asia, and it has to adjust its customs, politics, or whatever kind of things that you come up with, as sure as that there's any relevance to that home country of that journal. So, and I think that in many cases, what's happened in Asia, or in Asian countries like Indonesia, is also relevant to a broader international audience. I think that, for instance, the EU is also in many cases very interested in what's going on in Asia. And from EU law, of course, there are a lot of issues there, because the European Union is also some kind of constitutional framework with all kinds of law disciplines. So what happens in Asia can also be relevant for the way the European Union makes its agreements or works on its developmental work in other countries in Indonesia, for example. So yeah, it sounds very simple, but the main thing that you have to do is, of course, make clear in the abstract already why the American public or American colleagues or European colleagues should want to read that article. Why does it bear any relevance to what they are doing? So if you can come up with a link to them, then of course you're welcome to write it. So, in my view, it would be very interesting. I think that in many cases it would be much welcome if people from Indonesia would write in international journals, because there's not that many international material. And yes, Indonesia is a huge country with a large population, very relevant to the world. I think many scholars would know more.
I lecture on the insurance law.
Yeah.
And one of my thought is that I tried harmonization in insurance law among Asian countries members.
Yeah.
So, like this topic, is it interested for a journal in the UK or
I think that will be of highly importance to a lot of people in the UK and in USA and whatever pieces of work, because insurance law is also relevant, I think, for foreign investors, for foreigners coming to Asian countries. So all these people, all these companies, all these foreign institutions who want to be active in Asian countries, they surely want, they have to know more about the insurance system in Asian countries. So I think that's a very good subject to write for an international journal. I think that for sure that also in the Netherlands and also in Europe, a lot of journalists would be interested in hear more, learn more about the developments in law on insurance. Certainly.
Probably also in the research for like how flood insurance in the Netherlands, and how Indonesia should do.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah, I remember you used to tell me that you, at the beginning of your writing, like your introduction part, you have to think that the readers is just ordinary people, so they don't know what you write, so you have to tell them from the beginning. So my problem is I don't know how to measure the level of the ordinariness of the readers.
Of course, and I think that's quite common when you work at a university. You have it also on the separate levels that you are teaching. And when you're teaching for first-year students, then you use more simple concepts and simpler language to some extent. And when you talk to these students, then of course you can go faster about, you can be quicker, you can be can have more difficulty in it. So that is one thing, and it will always be difficult to assess what the level of the audience is, of course. But in general, that's what we do. And you always ask yourself what's the capability of the audience to grasp what you're going to say. That's one thing. The main thing I wanted to say, of course, all the things that you're writing, especially when you're publishing, it has to be up to the academic standard. The final group, that is the most important. But you could really ask yourself, well, if I want to have a broader audience than only my 8 or 10 colleagues in constitutional law that are really upfront runners in that issue as well, and you really want to address a broader audience, then you have to really think about, how can I get in touch with these people, and therefore, you have to use a more plain language, I think, and have to explain more to other people, to explain more about the concepts that you're using, the terms that you're using, and it will always be difficult, but luckily colleagues and supervisors, etc., are working to help you to find that audience and to find a way to use the correct words and the correct sentences about it. Because there's no, what you can do, it's very practical, is to have some kind of a test battle. And so if you've written the piece, then I think you think, well, which people do I want to have? Be capable to understand it. You just simply hand it out to certain people. Say, well, okay, read it for me. What do you think about it? Could you understand it or not? That's a simple way to go. That will also be always be difficult. That's a very practical way. And if you've written a piece, please present it to other people as well. That's one of the things, but I did not mention it, but for it's always very important, of course, to get colleagues involved. But if you ever have a chance to present your work to others as well, please use the opportunity. It always will sharpen your mind. It will always be helpful in finding the loopholes in your way of presenting the argument. So I always very encourage my own PhD students to do as much as presentations on their work as possible, because it's also very helpful because you have to explain it to the audience and to find the specific words, the concrete words that really clarifies the things that you are writing on. So teaching forces you to clarify your thoughts and your understanding of things. And it can also be helpful and rewarding in presenting the research that you're doing. The lunch is already the important part. The important part of the day. Are there any other questions? If not, then of course I wish you a lot of success with your next articles, next book, and your PhD project, if you are involved in PhD. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you once again for explaining, and let's conclude our session today. And then after this, we will have this session. The most important session is lunch.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for all the participants.
Thank you.